My name is Claire. I am 28 years old, and this story begins with a phone call that felt like a blade against my throat. 5 times in one morning, my father's name flashed on my screen. No warm greeting, no trace of pride, only the same cold command I had memorized since childhood. His words were clipped metallic. You will attend your sister's wedding or forget about college. We are done paying. That line would have destroyed me years ago. Back then, I was the invisible daughter, quiet, obedient, living under their roof and their control. They believed fear of losing tuition would cage me forever. What they never knew was that I had already built my freedom in secret. While they thought I was drifting in some small community college, I was at Columbia on a full scholarship, graduating with honors. While they imagined me broke, I was building a career in data analytics that paid 6 figures with my own apartment, my own savings, and not a single debt tied to their name. So when that voicemail ended, I didn't panic. I didn't beg. I smiled. Because I realized something powerful. They had no control left. They were threatening to cut strings that I had already untied years before, and that knowledge lit a fire in me. I opened my laptop, leaned back in my chair overlooking Lake Michigan, and stared at the airline booking page. My finger hovered over the first-class option. Not because I needed the comfort, not because I wanted to flaunt, but because it was a message. They demanded my presence. I would come, yes, but not as the girl they had discarded. I would walk into that wedding as the storm they never saw coming. I thought of the years I had swallowed their silence. The birthdays they forgot the science fair, they skipped the graduations they left early for Lily's hair appointment. Every slight, every dismissal had sharpened me like steel. They believed Lily's wedding would be another stage where I stood in the shadows. But this time I wasn't coming to fade. I was coming to shatter illusions. And yet under that defiance, there was something more tender. I wasn't just seeking revenge. I wanted truth. I wanted them to look me in the eye and see what they had ignored for 2 decades. To finally say, this is who I became without you. And I wanted Lily the golden child to understand that her perfect day stood on foundations built with lies. So I booked the flight, first class. The confirmation email hit my inbox with a soft chime, but to me, it sounded like a battle drum. Let the wedding begin. You might wonder why I would walk back into a home that had buried me alive in silence. Why not stay in Chicago, sip my coffee, and watch their fantasy collapse from a distance? Because sometimes freedom is not only walking away, sometimes freedom is walking back, standing in the very place they erased you and showing them you cannot be erased. That is where my story truly begins. At the edge of power reclaimed with a single click on a flight to the past. What followed would tear open my family's illusions, expose a predator hiding in plain sight, and force every one of them to confront the truth they had buried beneath ribbons and roses. And by the time the wedding was over, not a single person in that house would ever look at me the same way again. So, this was only the first step. The call that was meant to break me became the spark that set everything in motion. And as I closed my suitcase, I whispered to myself, "You wanted me back. You will wish you never asked." The airport was buzzing with morning chaos when I wheeled my suitcase toward the gate. I held a first-class boarding pass between my fingers, like it was proof of something larger, proof that I no longer moved under anyone's command but my own. When I sank into the wide leather seat champagne flute waiting on the tray, I let myself breathe. For once, the journey itself carried power. I wasn't running. I was arriving. I thought of my father's voice in that voicemail, sharp as steel, dripping with the same control he had wielded my entire childhood. He expected me to stumble back like always, to nod to obey. What he didn't know was that obedience had died long ago, replaced by strategy. Every scholarship essay I wrote at Columbia, every midnight study session, every internship in Chicago had been a brick in the fortress I now lived within. And still they thought they could yank me home like a puppet. As the plane lifted off, I stared out over the lake. The skyline glittered below, receding into memory. I whispered to myself, I am not coming home as a daughter to be ordered. I am coming home as a woman who owes them nothing. The engines roared, and I felt something inside me roar back. 2 hours later, the plane touched down in my hometown. I walked through the small terminal with my head high. People turned to glance at me not because they knew who I was, but because I carried myself differently. Years ago, I would have slouched, hoping no one noticed me. Now, I welcomed every pair of eyes, let them see. Outside, the rental car gleamed under the weak afternoon sun. As I drove the familiar cracked roads, the leaning welcome sign appeared like a ghost from my past. The town was unchanged, but I wasn't. Every pothole reminded me of the nights I had driven away at 17, clutching 2 suitcases and a determination to survive. When I pulled into my parents' driveway, the porch looked deceptively warm with its flowers and fresh paint. I knew better. Behind that door waited the same cold hierarchy I had escaped. Yet I felt no tremor in my hands as I reached for the bell. The door swung open before it chimed. My mother stood there, clipboard in hand, eyes flicking past me as if checking whether the neighbors had seen. "You made it," she said flatly. No hug, no smile, just a glance over her shoulder already moving on. I stepped inside and the air smelled of vanilla candles mixed with something chemical like paint covering old cracks. Boxes of ribbon and programs cluttered the living room. "Put your bag over there," she said, pointing vaguely toward a corner. "We need the welcome baskets done before 4. I hadn't even removed my coat. "I just walked in the door," I replied. She looked up, her eyes dismissing me in a second. "Now that you're here, be useful." The words landed like a script I knew by heart. Years of being the utility child, the fixer, the background presence. I had expected distance, maybe hostility. What I hadn't expected was this seamless return to invisibility, as if the last 7 years of my life never happened. Within minutes, a hot glue gun was in my hand, fake pearls piled in front of me. My father appeared later, glasses perched low, holding a seating chart. "Good, you're settled," he said, already issuing orders. Not a word about my trip. Not a word about how I had been, just commands. I sat quietly, but inside I burned. I could have told them about the meeting I left with my company's CFO. I could have told them about the salary that dwarfed theirs combined. But I didn't. Not yet. They still thought I was weak, dependent, unfinished. And that belief would make the truth hit harder when it finally came. For now, I played along. I glued ribbons, I smiled politely, I carried the weight of their blindness without flinching. Because this time I wasn't here to be seen as useful. I was here to change the story. But before I go further, let me pause. You're watching me unravel years of silence and walk back into a house that once buried me in shadows. And I want to ask you, where are you watching this from? Drop your city or your country in the comments. And if you believe stories like mine deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what comes next will not only shock you, it will show you how truth can burn through even the thickest walls of denial. I carried my bag upstairs after the first wave of orders. The guest room, once mine, was now nothing more than a storage closet, boxes stacked against the wall, old curtains pulled tight to hide the dust. I changed into plain clothes, careful not to wrinkle my travel outfit. Every step reminded me in this house nothing about me had ever been preserved. When I walked back down, I heard her before I saw her. My sister Lily's voice cut through the air like glass. I said, cascading, not gathered, "If the florist can't follow instructions, maybe we should find another one." She swept down the stairs wrapped in chiffon and irritation phone pressed to her ear. She spotted me, raised one manicured finger, and kept berating whoever was on the other end. When she finally hung up, she offered me an air kiss near my cheek. "You made it. Thank God. The caterer is threatening to walk, and Mom is drowning in seating charts. This wedding is going to kill me." She didn't ask about my flight. She didn't ask about my life. She didn't notice the tension in my shoulders. In this house, Lily's stress eclipsed everything else. "Dinner's at 6, my mother chimed in, already bustling past. "You'll meet Evan tonight. He's been a blessing. Brilliant with investments. Numbers run in the family," Lily added, casually, already walking away. "You'll see. He's amazing." I said nothing, but something inside me stirred. Numbers did run in the family, but not in the way they thought. At 6 sharp, Evan arrived. He walked in, carrying an expensive bottle of wine, his white shirt pressed to perfection. He was tall, smooth, confident. "So this is the mysterious sister," he said with a dazzling smile. He shook my hand firmly. "Lily talks about you all the time. She says you're the quiet one." I smiled politely, but inside, alarms rang. Men like him spoke too well, moved too smoothly. And when he began talking about crypto, about token liquidity, about his global connections, I watched the pattern unfold. He spoke in polished phrases, throwing out names like Singapore and Zurich, words that impressed my father, but meant little without context. At the table, everyone leaned forward. My mother beamed. My father nodded as if he had suddenly become a financial genius. Lily laughed at all his jokes, eyes sparkling like a teenager in love. But I asked questions, specific questions. Which platform are these tokens issued on? Ethereum, Solana, proprietary? Evan blinked, then smiled just a moment too late. Proprietary, hybrid, transaction speed and security optimized. Interesting, I thought. His answer was vague, almost rehearsed. I pressed again. What protocol for smart contracts? He waved a hand, chuckling. That's technical stuff. My team handles it. My father cut in sharply. Is there a point to this interrogation? No point, I replied evenly. Just curious. My mother's lips tightened. You always had a way of making people uncomfortable. Evan laughed smoothly. It's fine. Skeptics are common. Revolutionary ideas always attract doubt. But I had seen this choreography before. I knew when someone was performing. My instincts, trained through years in data analytics, told me something was off. The vagueness, the charm, the way he dazzled with geography instead of facts, it wasn't business. It was theater. I stayed quiet the rest of the evening. Let them glow under his light. Let them ignore me. Because silence was no longer weakness. Silence was strategy. And now I want to pause again to pull you into this table with me. Imagine sitting there watching your family cheer for someone you know is hiding something. Would you speak up? Would you press harder, even if it meant becoming the villain in their eyes? Tell me in the comments what you would have done in that moment. Because I already knew I wasn't done. The cracks in his story were only the beginning. Dinner that night stretched long like a stage play with rehearsed lines and carefully timed laughs. The formal dining room glittered under the chandelier. Silverware gleamed, napkins folded like swans. My mother had orchestrated it all, but the real conductor of the evening was Evan. He slid into rhythm almost too easily. Between bites of filet, he wove tales of investment opportunities that sparkled with promise. With rates the way they are, he said smoothly, public markets are volatile. But decentralized assets, there's the future. My father nodded as though he had studied finance his entire life. He's opened my eyes, he said proudly. Banks are old-fashioned. Evan leaned back, confident. Most people don't realize it, but in Singapore, Zurich, even Dubai institutions are already shifting portfolios. I'm working with a group offering pre-IPO tokens tied to government partnerships. Very exclusive. Lily glowed beside him, sipping wine as though she were part of some global elite. Tell them about the yacht, she urged. Evan chuckled. Last month I met an angel investor on his yacht in the Adriatic. Only way to discuss business without distractions. The table laughed politely. Everyone seemed dazzled. Everyone but me. I placed my fork down deliberately and asked, which regulatory body is approving those tokens? You must have SEC documentation for domestic investors. The air shifted. Evan's smile flickered. These are private placements, not your average retirement account stuff. My father bristled. Enough, Elena, you're being combative. I kept my voice calm. Asking about compliance is not combative, it's common sense. My mother gave a strained smile. You've always had a way of making people uncomfortable. Just let your sister be happy. Evan jumped in with a dismissive laugh. It's fine. I get this all the time. Visionaries always attract skeptics. Lily slammed her glass down. Why are you doing this? Every time something good happens to me, you try to ruin it. The accusation hit harder than it should have, but I held steady. My father pointed his knife at me like it was a baton. You're resentful. It's not Evan's fault you've been struggling. They still believed I was the weak one, the daughter who never measured up. They had no idea I had made more money in one quarter than they earned in a year. but saying it would only spark accusations of arrogance. So I stayed quiet even as my pulse thudded. Evan kept performing, layering his story with more exotic names and vague promises. Cayman Islands, Switzerland, off-market deals, all glitter, no substance. I recognized the choreography. Confidence, boldness, foreign cities. It was designed to seduce people like my father, and it worked. I watched Lily lean into him, eyes full of worship. My mother smiled proud. My father nodded like he had discovered buried treasure. Evan was winning the room, and he knew it. Yet beneath his polish, I sensed a fracture, a note that didn't belong in the song. I didn't know his full game, but I could feel the wire pulling taut, waiting to snap. That night I didn't sleep much. I replayed every sentence, every twitch in his smile. My instincts screamed he was hiding something big, and if I didn't act, my family would fall straight into his trap. And put yourself at that table with me. Everyone else cheering, and you're the lone voice of doubt. Would you keep pressing, or would you stay silent, waiting for proof? Share in the comments what your instinct would be, push back, or bide your time. Because for me, silence wasn't surrender. It was preparation. The next morning, sunlight spilled through thin curtains, but it did nothing to clear the heaviness in my chest. I needed air, and I needed distance from Evan's polished smile. Wandering through the house, I found myself at the door of my father's study. I hadn't stepped inside that room since I was 17. The smell hit me first, stale paper dust, and faint traces of cigar smoke he thought no one noticed. The shelves were lined with unread books, self-help titles on finance, and framed certificates from community college courses he'd taken decades earlier. He always flaunted them like badges of authority. On the desk sat a neat stack of papers waiting to be signed. My eyes froze on the header home equity loan refinance agreement. My breath caught. I pulled the papers closer, scanning each line with the precision that had shaped my career. The refinance was recent, only 3 weeks old, and the amount, massive. Flipping further, I saw a note in the margin scribbled in my father's tidy cursive per Evan's recommendation. 20% returns projected by Q2. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a casual investment. This was recklessness dressed as opportunity. He had tied the house nearly paid off after 25 years, to Evan's promises. The roof over their heads, the supposed family legacy now hanging on a stranger's word. I forced myself to place the papers back exactly as I had found them, though my hands trembled. Downstairs, chaos reigned. Bridesmaid kits, calls with florists, caterers threatening to walk. All the noise in the world, yet none of them noticed the real danger rising like floodwater beneath their feet. Later that afternoon, I stepped outside for a breath of cool air. My Aunt Diane was bent over the rose bushes, gloved hands tugging at weeds. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face. "Didn't think I'd see you here again, kid." "Family duty," I said, forcing a smile. Diane dusted off her knees, straightening. "Lily's wedding is a production." "That's one word for it," I murmured. She glanced toward the house, then leaned closer. "You believe in that fiancé of hers?" My eyebrow arched. "You don't—" Diane hesitated, then shook her head. "Something feels off. Last month, a neighbor in Tampa lost his retirement fund to a guy who talked just like Evan. Crypto this, global that. Promised returns too good to be real. Changed his name a few times." My pulse quickened. "Do you remember the name?" "Bits and pieces. Edward, Ethan. I can't recall exactly, but the face, the charm, eerily familiar." I thanked her quietly, though my heart hammered. I went back upstairs, closed the door to the guest room, and pulled out my laptop. Gone was the obedient daughter who once begged for scraps of approval. What sat before the screen now was a trained analyst with an advanced degree, a career in fraud detection, and a mind built for patterns. I typed his name, Evan Cross. Nothing substantial appeared before 2 years ago. Suspicious. I widened the search. That's when I stumbled across an archived engagement announcement in Colorado from 3 years back. Same face, different name, Ethan Lewis. Digging deeper, I uncovered remnants of a deleted LinkedIn profile under another alias, Edward Lambert. The resume mirrored Evan's pitch too perfectly: blockchain advisor, global finance investor network. 3 names, same man. same script. The pattern was undeniable. He appeared charmed, promised fortunes, then vanished after large sums shifted hands. Bankruptcy records in each city confirmed it. Investors left gutted within months of his arrival. I sat back, pulse steady but fierce. This wasn't jealousy. This wasn't bitterness. This was data. Hard, cold proof of a predator. And I knew then I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. My family was standing on the edge of a cliff, blindfolded, and Evan was smiling as he prepared to push. If you were me, if you uncovered proof that your sister's fiancé was a fraud while your whole family adored him, what would you do next? Would you confront him immediately, or would you wait until you had enough to bury every lie? Share your thoughts below. Because I already knew my answer. I would gather everything. And when I struck, it would be with precision sharp enough to tear his performance apart. That evening, the house pulsed with wedding chaos, flowers arriving, late bridesmaids, arguing over shoes, my mother's voice ricocheting from room to room. It was the perfect cover. No one noticed me slip out to the backyard where the air was cooler, calmer. Aunt Diane was there again, kneeling in the dirt beside her roses, hands buried in soil, as if the flowers were the only steady thing in this entire family. She looked up when I approached. "You need a break too?" she asked, pulling off her gloves. I nodded. "Feels like the whole house is drowning." She gave a dry laugh. "That's one word for it. But drowning in what matters most, appearances." We stood in silence for a moment. Then she leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Tell me honestly, do you trust him, that fiancé of Lily's?" I studied her face. Diane wasn't dramatic. She wasn't one for gossip. If she asked, it meant something weighed on her. "Why do you ask?" "Because I don't," she said flatly. She brushed dirt from her knees. "He's charming, sure. But I've seen men like him before. Last month, a neighbor of mine in Tampa lost his entire retirement savings. A smooth talker, promised crypto returns, global networks, you know the type. Sound familiar?" My pulse jumped. "Did your neighbor ever mention his name?" "Not clearly. He said the man used different names. One of them was Edward, maybe Ethan. The details blurred, but the voice, the style, it stuck with me. Same swagger, same too good to be true promises." Her words wrapped around me like a confirmation of what I already suspected. Evan wasn't just slick, he was recycled. A repeat performance in a new town under a new name. "Does Lily know?" Diane asked quietly. I shook my head. "She doesn't want to see it. None of them do." Diane sighed, standing to her full height. "Then you'd better be ready. Because if he's what I think he is, your family is walking straight into a trap." Her gaze locked with mine, steady and sharp. For the first time since I'd stepped back into that house, I felt a surge of something, an ally. Someone else who could see through the glitter in the gowns. That night back in the guest room, I closed the door and powered on my laptop. The glow of the screen painted the walls with cold light. My mind replayed Diane's words. Edward, Ethan, different names, same man. I typed faster, chasing leads, public registries, business databases, cached social media. The deeper I dug, the clearer the pattern became. Evan Cross had no substantial record before 2 years ago. Then came Ethan Lewis' engagement announcement in Colorado. Same smile, same eyes. Another search revealed Edward Lambert LinkedIn remnants cached by the Internet Archive, blockchain advisor, global finance, investor network. Each alias tied to sudden spikes in bankruptcies in local records. I leaned back, staring at the evidence. The man sitting at my family's table was a professional mirage. He appeared dazzled, drained communities dry, then vanished. And now he was wearing a new name, Evan. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with clarity. This wasn't personal bitterness. This wasn't jealousy. This was fraud. A deliberate cycle perfected over years. I created a new folder on my laptop and labeled it Cross Fraud Risk Report V1. I began compiling everything. Screenshots, cached profiles, archived announcements, financial spikes. Every puzzle piece fit too neatly to ignore. For hours I sat cross-legged on that old bed, fingers flying across the keyboard. I was no longer the invisible daughter. I was the investigator. The one person standing between my family and devastation. When I finally shut the laptop, the room was silent except for my heartbeat. I whispered into the darkness, "You picked the wrong sister this time." Yo. If you were me alone in a house that refused to see the truth, holding evidence that could shatter their fantasy, what would you do next? Would you reveal it immediately, or would you keep digging until the case was undeniable? Leave your answer below, because I knew my choice. I would gather proof strong enough to burn every illusion to the ground. The next morning, I woke with determination instead of dread. The whispers of Diane's warning still echoed in my ears, and the folder on my laptop had become the only thing that mattered. I wasn't here to fold napkins or glue fake pearls. I was here to uncover the truth. I sat at the small desk in the guest room, the hum of my computer filling the silence. I opened Cross-Fraud Risk Report V1 and started adding layers. Public records, archived websites, even fragments of deleted profiles. Each click revealed more shadows of Evan's past lives. First came the engagement announcement from Colorado Ethan Lewis, smiling beside a woman in a photo arm around her waist, a wedding that never happened. Then came the LinkedIn page under Edward Lambert, blockchain advisor, global finance strategist, all the same buzzwords Evan had used at dinner. And behind those names, I found a trail of bankruptcy filings in small communities, investors drained dry, families left in ruin. The pattern was precise. He appeared under a new name, dazzled a circle of influence, extracted money, and disappeared. Each alias lasted just long enough to build trust. Then he vanished before authorities could piece it together. He wasn't improvising, he was running a polished operation. I leaned back, staring at the screen. The evidence was damning, but not yet complete. I needed a witness. Someone who had lived through his betrayal. That's when I remembered a police report tied to Edward Lawson, another alias. Buried in the details was a name, Karen Delaney. I called. 3 transfers later, a sympathetic dispatcher in Colorado gave me a lead. Karen picked up on the second ring, her voice cautious. "Who is this?" "My name is Elena Hart. You don't know me, but I think the man who nearly ruined your life is about to marry my sister." Silence. "Then where can we meet?" The next afternoon, we sat across from each other in a quiet cafe just outside town. Karen looked older than her years, her hands trembling slightly as she stirred her coffee. She slid a worn folder across the table. Inside were photographs, bank statements, emails, even a faded engagement invitation, her name beside Edward Lawson. Same face, same polished smile. We met at a tech conference in Denver. Karen began softly. He said he was building something revolutionary. I believed him. He proposed 6 months later. My parents adored him. He convinced us to co-sign a loan. I wired him $60,000 for a pre-investment deal. 3 days before the wedding, he vanished. Her voice cracked, but she kept speaking. The police couldn't trace the money. Offshore accounts, no contract. They ruled it a civil matter. Just like that, he was gone. I listened, jaw clenched. The pain in her eyes was raw, yet beneath it burned resilience. She pulled a USB stick from her purse. I saved everything. Emails, voicemails, texts. The police said it wasn't enough. Maybe it will be for you. I took it, my hand steady. It will be. Thank you. Karen gripped my wrist. Her eyes searched mine. Promise me something. Don't let him ruin another life. I won't, I whispered. Not this time. Walking back to my car, the weight of her story settled on my shoulders. This wasn't just about Lily anymore. This was about justice for Karen, for every victim, for anyone who had fallen for Evan's performance. And I was no longer afraid. That night, I loaded the USB onto my laptop, watching file after file flood into my report. His aliases lined up like soldiers in a row. Evan Cross, Ethan Lewis, Edward Lambert, Edward Lawson. The same man wearing different names, leaving the same devastation. The puzzle was no longer scattered, it was complete, and I held it in my hands. Now let me ask you, if you uncovered a predator weaving lies under different names, would you go public immediately, or would you wait until the moment guaranteed to break every mask he wore? Comment below what you would do, because I knew what I had to do. I would wait. And when the truth exploded, there would be no way for him to escape. The cafe was quiet except for the soft hum of an old espresso machine. I sat across from Karen, the woman who had once believed in a man who had worn my sister's ring. Her eyes were guarded, shoulders tense, but there was something unshakable in her presence. She slid the folder closer to me, and I opened it carefully. Inside were fragments of a life that had been dismantled. Photographs of smiling engagements, bank statements drained of savings, and email printouts filled with promises of wealth. Each line echoed with the same rehearsed charm I had heard at my family's dinner table. But this time, the words weren't just suspicious, they were proof. Karen lifted her sleeve, revealing a small tattoo on her wrist. A date. I got this to remind myself never to ignore red flags again, she whispered. Her voice trembled, but it carried steel. He left me with nothing but debt and shame. My parents still ask what I did wrong. I swallowed the anger rising in my chest. You didn't do anything wrong. He did. Her eyes searched mine, fragile yet fierce. You sound like you've lived this before. I exhaled. I've lived the shadow of it. My family believes he's their savior. My father has already tied the house to his promises. My mother trusts him with her retirement. And my sister, she thinks he's her happy ending. Karen shook her head slowly. She won't believe you, not until it's too late. I don't need her to believe me, I said. I just need enough evidence so that when the cracks show, they can't deny what's right in front of them. She pulled a USB stick from her purse and set it on the table between us. Everything I had, I saved. Emails, voicemails, texts. Police said it wasn't enough for a conviction. Maybe combined with what you find it will be. I picked it up, closing my fingers around the metal. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with resolve. There are 2 more women, Karen added, her voice steadier now. Different states, different names, same story. He moves like a ghost, reinventing himself each time. By the time people piece it together, he's already vanished. The cafe air felt heavier. I looked at her, at the lines etched from years of carrying this story. You're not alone anymore, I said firmly. I'll make sure of that. Her hand shot out, gripping mine. Then promise me something. Promise me you'll stop him. Promise me your sister won't end up like me. I held her gaze. I promise. He picked the wrong family this time. Walking back to my car, the folder pressed against my chest. I felt the weight of Karen's plea settle into me like armor. This wasn't just about Lily's wedding. This was about every person he had left in ruins. And I would not let him vanish again. That night I uploaded the USB contents to my laptop. The files unfolded into a tapestry of deception screenshots, of sweet messages sent hours before bank transfers, voicemails filled with love and urgency contracts that disappeared when money changed hands. Piece by piece, the puzzle locked into place. I renamed the folder Cross-Fraud Master File. It was no longer just data, it was a weapon. Staring at the glowing screen, I felt the fire in my chest rise. This wasn't revenge, it was justice. And when I finally revealed it, there would be no more shadows for him to hide in. If you were sitting across from Karen, hearing her story, watching her hands tremble as she handed you the proof, what would you feel? Would it be anger? Would it be fear? Or would it be the fire to fight back? Tell me in the comments, because in that moment, I knew exactly what I felt, determination. And that determination was about to tear my family's perfect illusion apart. The living room felt colder than usual, though the afternoon sun poured golden light through the windows. My laptop sat open on the coffee table, a stack of printed documents beside it. My hands rested on the keyboard steady, though my heartbeat pounded in my ears. I need all of you to listen, I said. My father Charles sank into his leather chair, arms crossed. My mother hovered by the fireplace, pretending to rearrange flowers. Lily curled up on the sofa, silk robe draped around her shoulders, eyes sparkling with pre-wedding excitement. And then there was Evan, leaning casually against the wall, swirling his glass of wine, confidence radiating. I connected the laptop to the television. The first slide appeared an engagement photo. Evan's face, but the name printed beneath it read, Edward Lawson. The room shifted. I clicked again. Another photo this time, Ethan Lewis. Same face, different woman, same polished smile. My mother frowned. What is this supposed to be? I advanced the slides. Bank statements showing massive transfers, police reports from Colorado timelines of vanished fiancés. The final slide played an audio clip, Karen's voice steady but broken. He left 3 days before the wedding, took everything. I turned to them. His name isn't Evan. He has used at least 3 aliases. Each time he promises, wealth wins, trust, drains accounts, and disappears. Evan laughed softly, shaking his head. This is absurd. A smear campaign. She's jealous, can't stand to see Lily happy. Sir, ma'am, I love her. I'd never hurt her. His tone was wounded, sincere, practiced. Lily looked at him desperately. Tell me it's not true. He touched her hand. Of course it's not true. My father stood, voice sharp. Enough, Elena. You've embarrassed yourself and insulted a guest in our home. He's not a guest, I said firmly. He's a predator. My mother's voice cracked. You've always hated Lily's happiness. This is about you, not him. Lily's eyes filled with tears. Every time I achieve something, you try to ruin it. Why can't you just let me have this? The words stung sharper than I expected. I turned to my father. He's lying to you. Charles jabbed a finger toward me. No, you're lying because you've always been jealous. Lily has charm, warmth, a family who actually wants her around. Admit it, you've resented her your entire life. The silence that followed was suffocating. I whispered, I make 6 figures. I built a life without you, and none of you ever noticed. That's not the point, my mother snapped. Family is about showing up, not digging for dirt. Evan placed an arm around Lily. It's okay, babe. She needs help. The words cut deeper than any insult. My chest tightened, but I stayed steady. I closed the laptop slowly. I warned you, I said, my voice low but certain. And when everything falls apart, remember this moment. I turned toward the door, ready to walk out. That's when Aunt Diane appeared in the hallway, her eyes locked on my father. I believe her, she said quietly. The room froze. She stepped closer. Charles, you never told Margaret about refinancing the house. I asked yesterday and you dodged. You're hiding something. My father's face darkened, but he didn't speak. The silence stretched heavy and brittle. I felt the walls of denial creak, but they didn't break. Not yet. I walked out into the night suitcase in hand, my father's furious voice echoing behind me. The door slammed. The lock clicked. For years I had imagined this moment being thrown out for daring to tell the truth. And now it had come, not with rage in my heart, but with clarity. I wasn't running away. I was walking away with the truth. And this is where everything shifts. They thought I was finished. They thought Evan had won. But they had no idea that the real collapse was just beginning. Stay with me, because what happened next shattered their perfect fantasy and exposed every secret they had buried. The front door slammed behind me, the echo rolling down the quiet street like thunder. My suitcase sat at my feet, shadows stretching across the porch under the single yellow light. For a moment I just stood there stunned. Not by their rejection, I had always expected that, but by how quickly it came. No hesitation, no questions. They had chosen Evan over me without blinking. I turned back and knocked once hard. My father yanked the door open, his face flushed with fury. What more could you possibly want? I lifted my chin, to say what should have been said years ago. My mother hovered behind him, torn but silent. Lily stood further back, still clinging to Evan as if his presence could shield her. You think I came here because I was jealous, I said, my voice calm but firm. You think I dug through his past because I couldn't stand to see Lily in white. You couldn't be more wrong. From my purse, I pulled out my company ID badge. I held it high so they could see the embossed letters. I didn't go to community college. I went to Columbia, full scholarship. Graduated top of my class in data analytics. I reached again, pulling out a letter on heavy company letterhead. I'm a senior data strategist at one of the top firms in Chicago. I pay my own rent, my own insurance, my own loans since you cut me off. Everything I have, I earned, without you. My father's mouth opened, but no words came. I stepped forward, forcing him back a step. While you applauded Lily for showing up, I was building a life you never bothered to ask about. You thought I was struggling, I was thriving, and you never saw it because you never looked. The silence inside the house was heavy. My mother's lips trembled. Lily's eyes darted between Evan's unreadable face and my steady one. I didn't come to destroy anything, I continued. I came to protect what little is left. I tried to warn you, I tried to save you, and you slammed the door. You're still leaving, my father growled, though the conviction had drained from his voice. Yes, I said, but I'm not running away. I'm walking away with the truth. I turned heels, striking the concrete like punctuation marks. Each step was final, sharp, resolute. I didn't look back, not once. The night air felt different this time, crisp, alive. I pulled my coat tighter, not against the chill, but against the weight I had finally laid down. The invisible daughter no longer existed. They would sit inside that house, spinning their illusions, clinging to Evan's charm. But truth had a way of showing up. Loud, brutal, undeniable. And when it did, they would remember this moment the night I stood at their door and told them exactly who I was. What? Now let me ask you, if you had the chance to reveal your true self to a family that had erased you, would you do it? Or would you walk away silently, letting them believe the story they built about you? Comment below and tell me what you would choose. Because for me, silence was no longer an option. And the declaration of my worth was the beginning of everything that followed. 3 days before the wedding, the fantasy cracked. At first, it was subtle. Margaret, my mother, assumed Evan had stepped out to finalize some surprise for the reception. Charles brushed it off, claiming Evan mentioned a business meeting. Even Lily excused his absence, whispering that maybe he wanted to give her space before their big day. But as the hours stretched, unanswered calls stacked one after another. By midnight, Evan's voicemail no longer carried his charming tone. It had been replaced by a sterile automated message. The following morning, reality began to sink its claws. His hotel suite, booked under the name Evan Cross, was empty. Checked out before dawn. No forwarding address, no message left behind, just silence. And then came the banking alerts. Charles sat at the kitchen table, face drained of color as he stared at his laptop. The wedding account emptied. Margaret logged into her retirement portal. Balance 0. The mortgage account, refinanced weeks earlier under Evan's guidance, now showed a massive balance due. Lily stood frozen, her manicured hands trembling around her phone. Envelope after envelope revealed more devastation. The trust account Charles had proudly opened to grow wealth through Evan's connections gone. Credit cards maxed. Backup savings transferred to an LLC in the Cayman Islands. My mother collapsed onto the couch, a soft moan slipping from her lips. My father clenched his fists so tightly his knuckles blanched white. His pride was crushed beneath the weight of betrayal. He had welcomed Evan into their home, defended him against me, even staked their legacy on his promises. Now every word I had spoken echoed louder. Vendors began to pull out. The caterer canceled after the deposit check bounced. The florist arrived not to deliver, but to remove every arrangement for lack of payment. Even the photographer called, citing unpaid invoices. The house that had once been brimming with bridal chaos now sat eerily quiet, filled only with the sound of Lily's muffled sobs. Her gown, custom-made and altered, hung limp in the hallway, untouched, a cruel reminder of everything lost. By evening, my phone buzzed, a message from Lily. 4 words, I was wrong, please. No emojis, no punctuation, just desperation. I sat in my Chicago apartment, the skyline blinking peacefully outside my window. Coffee in hand, I reread the message. The irony wasn't lost on me. Home had never been the place where I felt seen, and now in ashes they called me back. Part of me wanted to ignore it, let them drown in the choices they had made, let them feel the sting of discarding the one daughter who had tried to protect them. But another part, the part that remembered Lily hiding under blankets during thunderstorms, the part that remembered secret chocolate bars shared under the bed, couldn't quite walk away. Not out of pity, not out of forgiveness, but because sometimes power doesn't mean revenge. Sometimes power means being the one person who doesn't turn away, even when everyone else has. So I pulled out my suitcase again, placing it on the bed. Not for a wedding, for a reckoning. But if you were me, if the sister who had ignored you, belittled you, chosen illusion over truth, suddenly begged for your help, would you answer? Or would you let her taste the consequences of her blindness? Write your answer in the comments. Because I knew mine, I would return, but this time on my terms. terms. When I stepped back into the Walker house, it was no longer glowing with ribbons and flowers. The porch stood bare staples ripped from the banisters where decorations had once hung. Inside, the silence was suffocating. No vendors rushing through the halls, no laughter of bridesmaids. Just the hollow echo of a family stripped of its illusions. Charles paced in the living room, clipboard limp in his hand. Margaret sat pale and exhausted at the dining table lines, carved deeper into her face than I remembered. Upstairs, Lily's muffled sobs seeped through the floorboards. They had called me back because there was no one else left. I didn't take off my coat. I didn't soften my tone. I set my briefcase on the coffee table and remained standing. "I'll help you," I said, "but not on your terms, on mine." My father turned eyes bloodshot. "We need immediate funds. The bank?" "No," I cut him off. "Not immediate cash you can squander. Every cent moves through a licensed financial advisor. You will not have direct access. If I step in, it's under professional oversight. Nothing informal, nothing hidden." His jaw tightened. He opened his mouth to argue, but Margaret placed a hand on his wrist, silencing him. "This isn't charity," I continued. "It's not a bailout. It's a transaction with conditions." I opened my briefcase and pulled out a stack of crisp papers. "First condition, you will sign this acknowledgement. In writing, witnessed, notarized." Charles frowned, scanning the top page. His face darkened. "This is nonsense." "Read it aloud," I demanded. Margaret picked it up, her hands trembling. Her voice wavered as she read, "We, Charles and Margaret Walker, acknowledge that for years we created and maintained an environment of favoritism and emotional neglect, favoring one child over the other." Her eyes lifted, brimming with shame. "You want us to sign this?" "Yes," I said, "because I won't let you rewrite history once you've been rescued. If I help you save this house, if I keep a roof over your heads, you will admit what you denied me for 20 years. You will say it." Charles shoved his chair back, the legs scraping the hardwood. "You don't dictate terms in this house." I leaned forward, voice cutting through the silence. "I do when I'm the one keeping the roof from collapsing on top of you." The room froze. For a long, brittle moment, no one spoke. Then Margaret's voice broke the silence, quiet, weary, but carrying more weight than I had ever heard from her before. "Charles, she's right." He spun toward her. "Don't you dare." "I said she's right," she repeated louder this time. Her hand shook as she set the paper down. "Do you know why I recognized it? Because it was done to me. I was the forgotten one, too. My sister was the golden child. My parents poured everything into her. I swore I would never repeat it, and then I did." The confession cracked the air. I hadn't expected excuses, maybe even tears. But not this. Not truth. "I told myself Lily needed more," Margaret whispered, twisting her wedding ring nervously. "That you were strong enough to stand alone. But really I was replaying the same script. Only this time I was on the other side." My breath caught. I studied her face, searching for sincerity. And for once I found it. "If signing this is what it takes," she said, "then I'll sign. Because I won't deny you any longer." She took the pen, pressed it to the page, and wrote her name with shaking hands. Then she slid the paper toward my father. He stared at it, pride warring with desperation. His eyes flicked to the foreclosure notices piled on the counter, to the empty accounts, to the weight pressing on his shoulders. Finally, with a grimace, he scrawled his name beside hers. I slid the papers back into my briefcase, snapping it shut. Only then did I sit. "Good," I said. "Now we can begin. But remember, this isn't about trust anymore. That ended when you chose him over me. This is about control, and this time I have it." They thought the reckoning was over. They thought signing a paper was the end. But they had no idea that the deepest cracks were still waiting to split wide open. Stay with me, because what comes next will tear down every wall they thought would protect them. The papers were signed, the acknowledgement sealed in ink. For a moment the house sat in silence, the weight of those signatures pressing down on everyone in the room. But I knew that ink on paper was not enough. It was time to strip away the last layer of denial, the years of silence, the buried wounds, the memories they had pretended never happened. I leaned forward, my voice calm but sharp. Do you want to know why I don't believe in your idea of family? My father stiffened. My mother's lips parted, but no words came. Lily stared at me wide-eyed. Because for me, family was always a one-way street, I said. Do you remember my 8th birthday? I sat in the kitchen, waiting for a cake that never came. You were too busy taking Lily to her dance recital. She got nothing more than a participation ribbon, but you took her out for ice cream and posted photos, like she was a champion. Margaret's hands gripped the edge of her chair until her knuckles whitened. 9th grade science fair, I continued. I won first place for analyzing county water quality. I stood there holding a ribbon while the principal asked why my parents hadn't shown up. Where were you at Lily's soccer game? She scored 1 goal. You told that story for weeks. I looked at my father, my words slicing through the air. And at my high school graduation, you left early. Not because of traffic, not because of work. Because Lily had a prom hair appointment. I walked across that stage and looked up at empty seats where you should have been. Each word landed like a stone. My mother pressed her hands to her mouth, her shoulders shaking. My father avoided my eyes. I turned to Lily. Her eyes glistened, mascara smudged. And you, I said softly but firmly. You knew Evan wasn't right, didn't you? She flinched, tears spilling over. For a moment I thought she might deny it, but something in my gaze held her there, pinned like a moth against glass. I saw things, she whispered. I knew something was off. He was secretive with his phone. He changed his stories. He promised money that never showed. But I thought maybe I was imagining it. No, I said. You thought maybe I was right. And if I was right, then you weren't the chosen one anymore, so you ignored the truth. Her shoulders shook as sobs broke free. I wanted one thing, just one thing where I finally had more than you. And if it meant pretending, if it meant looking away, then I did. The confession hung heavy in the air, smoke curling around all of us. No one moved to comfort her. No one had words left. Charles leaned back, his authority drained. Margaret pressed her face into her hands. The golden child was breaking apart under her own admission, and the walls of favoritism they had built for 20 years were crumbling with her. I stood in the center of the room, no longer invisible, no longer begging for scraps. The silence wasn't suffocating anymore, it was liberating. They had finally heard me. Not because they wanted to, because they could no longer deny me. The clock ticked in the corner each second, marking the collapse of a family built on illusions. And here's what I want to ask you. If you had carried years of pain, moments erased, victories ignored, would you stay silent forever? Or would you finally lay them bare no matter how much it hurt to speak? Tell me in the comments. And if you believe in voices that refuse to be silenced, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Because the storm was not finished. The deepest reckoning was still on its way. The house grew quieter in the days after Lily's confession, but quiet didn't mean peace. It was the silence of people who had been forced to sit with truths too heavy to ignore. I thought maybe that was the end of it, that Evan had vanished for good, his performance exposed. But predators don't vanish quietly. They strike back, twisting truth into weapons. A week later, a courier delivered a thick envelope directly to me. Cream-colored paper, bold serif font, and a legal letterhead meant to intimidate. The message inside was short, sharp, and dripping with arrogance. Cease and desist. It accused me of defamation, libel, and interference with contractual relations. It claimed I fabricated identities to destroy Evan's reputation, and it threatened a lawsuit for damages exceeding $500,000. I read it once, then again. My pulse didn't race, my breath didn't falter. Instead, I almost laughed. It was classic Evan, take the truth, invert it, and count on fear to do the rest. But I wasn't one of his usual marks. Fear had no grip on me anymore. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Vivian Scott came the voice on the other end. My mentor. The woman who had guided me through my first corporate fraud case. He's back, I said simply. Lawsuit, she asked. Threat of one. Her tone was calm, steady as stone. Then we answer him with the truth. That evening, I spread the evidence across her conference table. Screenshots from Karen, police reports from Colorado, bankruptcies tied to his aliases, archived announcements under names that changed but a face that didn't. Vivian moved through each piece like a surgeon annotating margins, with legal codes and case precedents. "This isn't defamation," she said firmly. "This is exposure. What he doesn't realize is that by sending this letter, he's opened the door for us." "You mean federal?" I asked. Vivian nodded. "Interstate fraud, multiple victims, cross-border transactions. The feds don't take kindly to men who shuttle stolen money through offshore accounts." Her words steadied me. For the first time, I realized Evan's arrogance had created his undoing. He wanted to scare me into silence. Instead, he had handed us a legal pathway to drag him into the light. Within a week, Vivian had assembled a package of evidence so airtight it felt like armor. Letters went out to the women Evan had scammed before requesting statements. Files were forwarded to federal enforcement contacts. The story was no longer about my family's humiliation. It was about a predator who had left a trail of devastation across 3 states. Evan fought back, of course. Another letter, this one louder, filled with legal jargon. Late-night calls to Lily dripping with false tenderness. "Your sister is lying," he whispered. "We're meant to be. I can fix this." But Lily, broken by the wreckage, finally hung up on him. The breaking point came 2 weeks later when federal agents arrived at the Walker house with questions. The neighbors saw. The whispers began. Evan's charm had curdled into suspicion, his name now spoken with distrust. And just like that, the predator became the prey. He didn't file the lawsuit. He didn't show up to court. By the time investigators traced the accounts, Evan Ethan, Edward Lawson, was gone. A fugitive running not with our money this time, but from the net closing in. I stood on the courthouse steps with Vivian beside me, the spring air sharp against my skin. I wasn't triumphant in the shallow sense. There was no joy in my sister's heartbreak or my parents' shame, but there was justice, real, tangible justice. And here is where I'll leave you with a question. If someone tried to silence you with threats, would you fold or would you fight with truth as your weapon? Leave your answer in the comments, because the battle with Evan wasn't just about my family. It was about every voice he had tried to erase. The City Hall auditorium glowed with warm light, a hum of voices filling the air. Rows of seats brimmed with people from every corner of the community, students, families, colleagues. I stood at the edge of the stage with a plaque heavy in my hands, my name etched into the Metal Community Leadership Award. When the applause rose, it felt different than anything I had ever known. It wasn't forced like my family's half-hearted claps when they remembered. It wasn't obligatory like teachers who praised me because they had to. It was genuine. A chorus of people who saw me for who I was, not the invisible daughter, but a woman who had fought back. As I stepped up to the podium, flashes from cameras caught the shimmer of tears in my eyes. My speech wasn't about betrayal or revenge. It was about visibility. I spoke of the children who grew up overlooked their accomplishments, muted by louder voices. I spoke of the worth that comes from within, even when no one else recognizes it. And I ended with this. Sometimes all it takes is one person to say, "I see you," and a life changes forever. The crowd rose to their feet. The sound of their clapping echoed in my chest like a promise finally kept. That night at a smaller gathering, I made an announcement I had dreamed of for years. The launch of the Visibility Grant, a scholarship for academically gifted students whose achievements had been ignored. Tuition, housing, books covered. No child would have to build a secret life in the shadows just to survive. As the room filled with cheers, Aunt Diane slipped to my side. Her eyes shone with quiet pride. "You weren't as alone as you thought," she said softly. I tilted my head, curious. "That first year at Columbia," she continued, "your scholarship didn't cover everything. You must have wondered how you scraped by. It was me. I sent the money anonymously. I wanted you to have a chance I never had." For a moment my throat closed. All those nights I believed I was utterly alone. She had been there, hidden but steady. I squeezed her hand. "Thank you." Later, back at my apartment, I sat at my desk drafting the first announcement for the scholarship fund. The glow of the screen lit my face as I typed. Each keystroke felt like defiance against every year of silence. Then a new email notification appeared. Subject line from Lily. The message was short. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I can't undo what I did. But I wanted you to know I had a daughter. She's healthy. She's beautiful. and I thought maybe you'd want to meet your niece. Do you? I leaned back, staring at the words, my heart twisted. For years, Lily had been my rival, my wound, and now she was extending a fragile bridge trembling in my inbox. I didn't know if I would cross it, but I knew the choice was finally mine. I stood by the window, the city stretching alive beneath me. My reflection looked back, not the invisible daughter, not the neglected child, but a woman who had reclaimed her worth. I whispered to the glass, steady and certain I chose freedom, and I do not regret it. And this is where my story closes for now. But family stories like mine never truly end. They twist, they echo, they resurface in new forms. If you followed me this far, I know you carry your own scars, your own truths, waiting to be spoken. So before you leave, subscribe to the channel and explore the next video waiting for you. It might just mirror the battles you fought in silence. Because every story of betrayal, every story of justice leads us closer to the freedom we all deserve. In the quiet, after everything, life no longer felt like a battlefield. I still carried the scars, but they no longer burned. They guided me. The battles with my family, the exposure of Evan, the endless nights of being unseen, all of it had shaped me into the woman who now stood free. There were mornings when I sipped coffee by the window, watching the city awaken, and felt a peace I never thought I'd earn. Not because everything was perfect, but because I no longer needed perfection to feel whole. Freedom wasn't about walking away from them, it was about walking toward myself. Lily's email lingered in my inbox, a fragile reminder that even the deepest wounds can leave behind the possibility of repair. I didn't know if I was ready to step across that bridge, but for the first time the choice was mine, and that mattered more than anything. Sometimes I thought about Karen, about the women Evan had deceived before. I thought about the scholarship fund and the students whose brilliance would no longer be silenced. Each step I took, each promise I kept, felt like a thread weaving a new legacy, not of bitterness, but of strength. The past would always echo, but echoes fade. What remains is the voice you choose to claim for yourself. And mine was clear now, strong, unshaken. I chose freedom, and I would choose it again every single time.